Welcome to Tripodcast, episode 304. It's Monday, September 16th, and Dick Ollek wants to talk about the 5 key components of a maintenance service agreement. That's right, maintenance service agreement, not a contract. What's the difference? Well, let's listen in.
In this session, I want to cover what I consider some key points in a customer agreement. And you'll notice that I didn't call it a contract. I called it an agreement or a maintenance service agreement. I found that many times people put up a barrier when you say contract. But if you ask them to sign a maintenance service agreement, it just seems like that barrier kind of comes down and it's a lot easier to get some agreement on it. And it doesn't sound quite as legal. You don't get the legalism that you would when you say contract. Now, one thing I want to make sure in this Tripodcast that we understand, I'm not offering legal advice. It's important that you develop your own agreement and you get your own legal counsel and let them review it as you make recommendations. But I'm going to recommend you get advice on about 5 points on the wording on about 5 points. And so let me give you those 5. Number 1 is that I always suggest that you get a 90-day termination clause. And let me make it very clear that it should be by either party. And my thing always was that I'll sign any agreement that you'll sign. And if you want out in 90 days or you want out in 7 days, I remember years ago doing some retail stores. And some of the chains required 7 days. They wanted 7 days if they wanted to cancel, but I had to give 45 days if I wanted to cancel. And I said I won't sign those because if we're going to be true partners in this facility to maintain it for you, we have to work together on the same thing. So anyway, whatever they want to sign, I'll sign as far as a termination clause. But I always request 90, and we can always negotiate. I know I've had some building service contractors say to me, can't get more than 30, and I've asked, how many times have you asked for that? And it's, well, you mean including the next 2 times? Yeah, that'll be 2. So I think you should ask for it, and you can always negotiate down. I would tell you that I probably had 50% of my contracts were 30 days, and the other 50 were anywhere from 60 to 90. So it does work. You can always negotiate down. It's hard to negotiate up. So anyway, that's number 1. Request the 90 days, and then you can negotiate down. Number 2, I suggest that you make the agreement an evergreen agreement. That means it goes on forever unless and until either party gives that 90-day notice that we just talked about in writing. This takes you out of the rebidding process. And I review a lot of agreements, a lot of contracts by building service contractors, and they always seem to want to put in there, this is good for 1 year from the date that we start service. That puts you in a position as a BSC of the customer feeling obligated that they have to rebid it each year or get new proposals each year. And if you just make it an evergreen contract, it just goes on forever, unless and until either party gives that 90-day notice of termination. I also like to suggest along with that you have a cure clause in there, whereby the customer needs to give you a 30-day notice to cure any deficiencies that they may find before the 90-day termination takes effect. So in effect, you got 120 days. Stuff happens, it just happens. And this gives you an opportunity to cure the deficiencies. I kind of put it in there really to start with, originally way back there, because I was having some struggles with property managers who frankly were turning over a lot more rapidly than were my employees. And we'd get some property manager who was maybe new on the job, and they'd come in and say, I'm going to save a bunch of money. And so I'm going to find things wrong, and then I can get rid of this company and save some money and get my buddy in here to clean. And I found with that cure clause that, well, then they had to write me a 30-day, I found this and this and this. And that just went on and on and on. And by the time they got around to wanting to terminate the contract, they were probably gone and on to the next job. Thirdly, have the billing start the first of the month. Now, I think most BSCs are doing that now anyway. But, our business is all about cash flow. And so we need to get the money in. And the customer understands that. They understand cash flow. So I remind them when we're there signing the agreement or making the final arrangements to begin the service. I always at that time remind them that the first invoice will be out about the time we start the service, so that not to be alarmed when all of a sudden we've come in and started and you now have an invoice in front of you. And I explain why. And I don't have a lot of people that ever made an issue of that. So anyway, and then number 4, spell out specifically in the agreement what triggers a price increase. Some of these items can be, insurance premium increases, increases in the minimum wage, payroll taxes that go up, federal, like FICA and state unemployment taxes or state employment taxes, federal employment taxes, workers' comp. One item that I always put in, and sometimes had to negotiate out, was a clause that said if they cancel the contract prior to 1 year's time, and I had in fact done a one-time yearly strip and wax job, or a one-time carpet cleaning job, and if they asked me to do that in the first month, and then proceeded to cancel the contract, they would that would be treated as a one-time job and billed accordingly. And that was experience speaking. I got stuck with that one time. I got a $30,000 strip and wax job in the first month of a contract. After the 30 days were up, they canceled me and said, no, that's really what we wanted. We really needed our floors done. You're on your way. And, of course, I had, as you could imagine, invested lots of money in getting that floor up to par. So I learned my lesson there. So that I would put that in there. Like I said, sometimes I have to negotiate it out of there, but it's still something that we need to put in, and we can always we can't put it in later. So let's put it in now, and if we have to negotiate it out, then we'll negotiate it out. Then the one that is the last one I want to talk about in this Tripodcast is a paragraph that outlines what happens in the event that a customer wants to, what I would call, steal your employee or take your employee. And it happens all the time. And I hear building service contractors many times wanting to put a very ironclad, well, first of all, some don't address it. Secondly, when they do address it, they do it in a legalistic, if you do this, I'm going to, you can't do it. You can't do it for a period of whatever. And I always took the positive approach. I said something like, I created wording that said that I have a major investment in recruiting people and in training the staff that works at your place of business. And in the event that you want to hire them, you're perfectly welcome to do so, and that we will invoice you at a percentage, and usually it was either somewhere between 15 and 25% of the annual wages, of the annual full-time wages of the employee that they hire. So to make it simple, if they hired an employee of mine that was $10 an hour, that would be about $20,000 a year. I would invoice them for anywhere from 15 to 25% of that. 25%, I'll use that now because that's easy math, would be $5,000. And I always put the wording in there, this is not a penalty, but rather a recruiting and training fee, because if we had not done such a fine job of doing the recruiting and the training, they would not be wanting to hire them. And if you put in words like that, that are positive as a recruiting and training fee, it makes it not sound like a penalty, and it's acceptable. And the question is, did I ever collect? Absolutely. Many, many times. And I found that I really collected a great deal, number of times, in the manufacturing field, because we might have day porters there or something, and they'd see them working, showing up for work every day, which their own people wouldn't do. And so they'd say, I want to hire Bill or Susan. And I'd say, that's fine. Their wage is whatever it was. And so they'd send me Bill. Now, if you're thinking out there that won't happen or can't happen, it does. It can, and it should, and you should put it in there. So, anyway, these are 5 key points that I would put into a service agreement, maintenance service agreement. And again, let me remind you, I don't offer legal advice, so consider those 5 points. See your own legal advisors, and consider putting those in there. Thanks for joining us.
You've been listening to a Tripodcast, short video and audio presentation about important topics in our industry. If you're a current subscriber to the Tripodcast, thank you. We appreciate it. If you're not yet a subscriber, please check it out. It's free and it's easy. Come to www.tripodcast.com, enter your email address on the right-hand column, and click subscribe. We'll send you out a new Tripodcast every Monday